Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you're new, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let's get right into this video. So today we're back again with Sister Spice.
Hello.
So this is gonna go ahead and be the second half of Sister Spice's nail set. We're doing her other hand. If you missed it in the last two parts, we did this hand. So if you missed that one, make sure you go check that out. And Sister Spice is also gonna get back into the creepy Reddit stories that we started in the last couple episodes as well. So you have to go watch them in order to understand this one. So here's the nail design we're gonna do on this hand. We are gonna be changing up a couple nails though. Okay, so we're gonna get started on the nail prep while Sister Spice gets into the creepy Reddit story. So let's do a little recap. So first of all, they are on their ship because they're fishermen, right?
Yeah, so the main character, his name's Nathan. I guess he is the one that drives the ship. They do commercial fishing or they catch fish, but they had to go back out to sea to get more fish because they didn't reach their quota. And so the captain is like, all right guys, we gotta go back out and get some more fish because they want that cha-ching. So they go out, they grab a couple of fish, but it wasn't enough. And then the captain's like, you know what? Let's be crazy. Let's go out even further. And the whole crew is like, are you sure? Because we're not really supposed to be going out that far. There's no landmass. I think it'll be okay because on the radar, it shows that there's no storms. They go up into the sea and then they see a huge storm brewing. And they're like, oh no. There's a humongous wave that kind of flip-sides their ship and they get turned over, and then all their electronics buzz out and they have, nothing works except for the radar a little bit, and they found another ship on the radar. So they put all their last little energy backup generators and stuff to get power to go to that other ship, climb aboard, lose one of their crewmates, and then they're like, what is this place? And so he types on his little laptop, sending out posts to this Reddit forum, can you guys help us? And then creepy things start happening. The narrator feels like he's being watched. I don't know, he hallucinates or gets possessed or something, and he sees the scary ghost, and it's like a transporting back in time to 1956, and that's kind of where we're at right now. But if you watch the other vids, you'll understand more clearly. God, please don't let it happen again. Don't let them be there.
Wait, I'm still confused.
We went to the Vanderdash grill and they're looking for ingredients. They're fighting and the main character's like, shut up. They hear piano playing and then they hear utensils and stuff, people in the grill.
They think that it sounds like there's a party or something going on.
Yeah, think about people.
Like in a restaurant.
Yeah, like an active restaurant. And then the main character's go up to the door and he's about to, I don't know, we're about to see. I turned and gave one last look at the others. They looked absolutely petrified. As I began to turn back, a new sound came. This one louder, almost ear-piercing. Toot! I ripped my hand away from the door, clamping both over my ears as they threatened to burst. What the heck? It continued for a few moments, and the realization slammed into my brain what the source was. It's a freaking ship horn! Then it ceased, dying away but leaving the sound echoing in my head. I slowly pulled my hand away, looking up to see everyone else doing the same. That's when I realized everything had gone dead silent. The sound of the piano and people were no longer coming from the other side of the door. It was as if they'd never been there in the first place. Turning, I saw the others had realized it as well. Wyatt suddenly strode forward, pushing past me and slamming his shoulders into the door. It flew open, softly hitting the wall behind with a thunk, revealing the empty restaurant as empty as it had been when we'd enter. For a moment, he simply stood there as we gathered behind him and looked out. Then he took 2 steps into the room. No, there's no way, he softly muttered to himself. He swung around and almost wild look in his eyes. I mean, you all heard that too, right? Slowly we nodded. His eyes darted around as he looked at the floor. That's impossible. We're alone on the ship, but there was people out here. People talking. There was a piano playing. He suddenly swung around, raised his arms, and screamed into the empty room. What the heck is going on? The 3 of us slowly left the kitchen. Vinny went to stand beside Wyatt, trying to calm him down, but I could see that the experience had, for a lack of better phrase, royally messed up that man's brain. And that wasn't even half as terrifying as what I saw yesterday. The thought made me snap my head up and look around the restaurant, half expecting to see the shadowy figures emerging from the corner. But nothing stirred. The radio over my hip squawked. Nate, come in right now. Over. I reached down, trying to steady myself. I took a deep breath and thumbed the walkie-talkie. I'm here. What's up, Cap? The man's voice came again. I noted with a pang of surprise that there was a trace of anger in it. Whatever your team is, get the heck up the radio room now. I looked up from the radio, seeing that everyone had turned to look at me. I saw the same expression of confusion and worry as I must have had on my face. I hit the button again. We're on our way. Sparing a last look around the restaurant, I motioned for the others to follow as I hurried for the hallway. So you're telling me that none of you managed to get inside this radio room and rip up the microphone? The captain demanded, the veins in his neck bulging out from barely disguised rage. Everyone stood in front of the radio room, which was now hung wide open, the metal doors slightly swinging, letting out soft creaks. I looked inside, seeing the ancient setup sitting along the left of the wall of the room. My eyes ran over the equipment stacked neatly on top of each other, finally coming to rest on the place where the microphone usually transmitted radio calls. I should say where it should have stood. Instead, the space lay bare, and I saw that it hadn't been gently pulled out of the system either. Frayed and snapped wires hung from the jack, still hooked into the radio, showing someone had ripped it out with great force. I finally found my voice. No, none of us would ever do that. Not where we want to get off this ship. He shot a glare at all of us, then shook the keys in his hand for emphasis. So, you expect me to believe that while we went to hunt for these, that the room just happened to unlock itself and the microphone just happened to tear itself away and walk away? Vinny spoke up. Look, Capt, Nate's telling the truth. We were nowhere near here, and none of us would sabotage the rescue like this. The man's eyes snapped up to look at him. I saw Spencer shoot an accusatory look at us. Then where exactly were you? Considering the captain called you over 20 minutes ago and told you to meet up with us right away. Because they were busy with the people in the restaurant. The sounds of the piano and stuff.
But that doesn't even make sense because they called them to go there after.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even matter anyway.
No.
They were off doing their exploring before anyone told them to get going.
No, yeah. Unless it took them 20 minutes to get there, but I mean...
Yeah, I'm like, can it not take them 20 minutes to get there?
I feel like maybe the radio went off, right? And they were so entranced by the sound, they were like transported back in time. You know, that the radio, they couldn't hear the walkie-talkie of the captain the first time the captain told them to come. And then, when the loud horn blew, you know, it like woke them up from the trance or something. And then the second time the captain radioed them, and that's why he's so mad, because that's the second time he told them to come.
Maybe.
A wave of confusion washed over me. What are you talking about, Spence? I asked him. He rolled his eyes at me. Oh, come on, dude. Don't give me that confused BS. The captain radioed you and said we found the keys. When you asked him if you four should meet up right away, he said yes. Then you said that you guys were on your way and you'd meet us here.
Wait, so how could they get in if they didn't have the keys? You guys have the keys. Like,
gosh, you literally have the keys. How did we get in here then?
they're just trying to like blame the weirdness on the other group. But it's like they shouldn't be splitting up now then.
We should all be sticking together. Sadly,
so now you can see everything we're all doing.
Yeah, sadly, it's going to make the work slower, but at the same time, we all have eyes on each other. A mixture of shock and further confusion began to rise in me as I saw Wyatt and Vinny exchange puzzled looks. No, that ain't right, Wyatt finally said. Nate asked that question, all right, but when the captain replied, he told us to keep going and search the restaurant for food and supplies. The captain turned an eye on Wyatt. What restaurants? Nobody ever said anything about a restaurant to me. I just said try and find some food and supplies. Everyone began to argue, but the sound was drifting away from my ears as my mind raced. He's right. He never said anything to me about restaurants before we split up. Just supplies. A shiver shot up my spine as another dot connected. And I never said anything about the restaurant when I replied to him. He was the one who... The realization slammed into me like a truck, and I felt all the blood drain from my face as the simple but terrifying conclusion came to the surface. That wasn't the captain, I breathed out. Everyone stopped arguing to stare at me. What? Andrew asked, seeming confused. I slowly turned to look at the three who'd been with me, quietly repeating myself. That wasn't the captain who was talking to us. I saw the realization slam into Wyatt and Vinny's face. Saw their face turn as pale as mine. Oh, heck no, Wyatt whispered, his eyes beginning to frantically dart around in their sockets. Somebody want to explain to me just what the heck you're all saying? the captain demanded, but I didn't answer. I stared at the shocked and frightened voices of my crewmates and my 2 crewmates. I forced my voice out in a squeak. Where's Will? Everyone went silent as they began to look around. They began to call his name. Will! And finally, everyone began to run around, searching for our missing friend, Spencer. Spencer dashed up the stairs to the bridge, returning later to confirm he was deserted. Panic began to well up inside me as we moved from the bridge back down to the pomade deck. The guy was here not even 5 minutes ago. How did he just slip away? Will! I heard the captain call. Oh, Will! I heard the captain call as he led the way to the main lounge, which stood as empty as it had been when we left. He turned around, a look of panic on his face. Where the heck did he go? He exclaimed as he continued to run from the other end of my room. A thought slowly began to push forward in my mind. For the life of me, I still can't explain why it came to me, but it persisted. The more I became convinced I was right. The Vanderdahl Grill, I shouted. Everyone turned to look at me, realizing most of them didn't know what I meant. I stabbed towards the aft section of the ship. The restaurant we went to! Wyatt and Vinny's face changed as their minds clicked. Moments later, the 3 of us were racing down the halls, the others struggling to keep up. We took the stairs down to the restaurant deck 2 at a time, the marble step threatening to fling our feet from under us. Reaching the landing, we sprinted past the purser's office and down the hall. I didn't even spare a glance at the still open porthole. I didn't look at anything until we reached the entrance of the Vanderdahl Grill, where I stopped dead in my tracks. Why'd you stop running? What? The captain began, but his voice died away as he heard it as well. Everyone stood silent and still as statues, listening. There were voices coming from inside the restaurant, just out of sight around a corner. I felt my pulse quicken and my heart began to pound. The first voice I instantly recognized as Will's. The man's snorting laughter was unmistakable. But it was the second voice, a woman's voice, that, for yet another time that day, froze my blood in my veins. Like Will's voice, the voice spoke too softly for me to be able to make anything out, but it was loud enough I was able to make out one specific detail. The woman spoke with a clear British accent. What the actual... Andrew managed out. I slowly turned to look at the captain. His face had turned white as a sheet, and I saw his lower lip quiver slightly. Oh, Cap! Then it set in, and he strode forward. Captain, no! I whispered, reaching out to snag his arm, but he tore himself out of my grip and walked into the restaurant. Instantly, the voices stopped speaking, and he simply stood there, staring at something out of sight. Then he gestured for us to come and join him. We all walked quickly to stand next to him. The restaurant was empty, looking exactly as how we left it, with one exception, a table near the piano. Will sat with his back to us. He didn't turn around as we entered, simply continued to sit and stare at the wall. Everyone exchanged a look, and then the captain led us over to him. As we approached him, I suddenly became aware of a smell which hung in the restaurant, one of which was impossible to miss. Perfume? It grew stronger as we stepped next to him. For a moment, I was terrified that we'd seen him unalive. His mouth wrenched open in a silent, unending scream. Like, I guess his mouth was just wide open. Mm-hmm. Instead, to our surprise, a happy, content smile adored his face.
Wait, so they walked into the restaurant and they see Will.
They see Will facing a wall.
But he's just alone.
But
in Will's mind, he's like in the party?
Mm-hmm, probably. Just like how the narrator, saw all those scary figures and stuff. Yeah, in Will's mind, he's probably in the party. But in reality, he's just sitting there. Mm-hmm. Instead, to our surprise, a happy, content smile adorned his face. So they go up and look at him. And he just has a smile on his face, staring at the wall. Mm-hmm. His eyes were glazed over, almost as if he had been drinking or hypnotized. Well, the captain finally asked him, his voice low and gentle. At his words, he swung his head to look at all of us. Oh, hey guys, he said, his voice sounding almost like a character in a cartoon who'd just been struck by Cupid's arrow. Wyatt spoke up. Dude, where'd you go? You scared us. Will shrugged his shoulders. I'm sorry about that, everyone. I met the most beautiful woman. He let out a content sigh. The woman of my dreams, for sure. A chill ran up my spine at his words. What woman? I managed out. He smiled. Her name is Diane. She's an actress, a singer. She's so intelligent and interesting. He sighed again. God, what a woman.
Don't you remember?
Remember
the
what?
comment?
But what?
The comment said if you see a nice, beautiful woman...
That's singing. To avoid her.
avoid her.
Oh, we gotta go back and read that comment, because what did they exactly... Yeah, they said that, and then it was like, avoid her because of what? Or just avoid her?
Just avoid her.
Then he turned more towards us, exposing the other side of his face. If I hadn't felt so mentally fried, I would have gasped. There was red lipstick marks on Will's right cheek. The kind you get when a woman wearing it kisses you.
Okay, we know. We make it assume.
It stood out clear as day, and even from the distance I could see it still looked wet. Maybe she just had a gloss on. But he's indicating that it was a fresh print. Will's smile grew. She likes me, you know? He declared, looking like the happiest man in the world. In any other situation, it'd be a sight that would warm my heart and make me happy for this man. In this situation, though, it scared the ever-living daylights out of me. Okay, this is way too creepy, Spencer finally said, his voice trembling slightly as he looked around the restaurant. You're not kidding, man, I said silently. The captain turned to us, worry now clearly etched on his face. Does anyone know what the heck is going on? He asked. Okay, now it's starting to get kind of like, whoa.
Juicy, like even scarier, because now everyone knows that's like something weird's going on.
And then the captain and Nate, who had the original weird experiences, are like, okay, yeah, Will just had one. It's time to come clean and tell him. Tell all of them the truth. I forced myself to speak up. As much as I wish I didn't, I think I do. Everyone turned to me. I took a deep breath, then I began to speak. I told them everything. About all the things you guys said and the things they denied. About the horrifying things I saw in the darkened hallway yesterday. And about the four of us experienced not only half an hour ago, right in this very restaurant. As I spoke, I saw some of my crewmates' face go pale. Others seemed to fight what I was saying. I saw Spencer and Andrew didn't believe a word I said, or at least I didn't want to. But I saw that the captain did. When I finished, there was a long silence. So basically he just told like about his experience, what just happened in the restaurant with them, and then all the creepy feeling watched and, you know, creepy things out the porthole he sees out the corner of his eye. Then the captain spoke. I'm not entirely sure I believe all this, that this is the actual Queen Elizabeth we're aboard, an actual ghost ship, but this, he gestured to Will, still smiling and the lipstick on his face, this is all I need to see to make my mind up. He looked over at me. We have over a week and a half's food and water left. We're going to gather it up and lower one of the lifeboats. We're going to row away from this ship as fast as we can, and we're going to pray to make it back to land. At his words, Will's face suddenly turned worried. No, I don't want to leave, he said. Not after meeting Diana. I want to stay. The captain grabbed Will by the arm and hoisted him to his feet. Frankly, son, I don't give a damn what you want. We're leaving now. The younger man began to protest and struggle, trying to wrench himself out of his grasp. But the captain was stronger and he pulled him towards the exit. He was almost shouting as we entered the hallway. Get off me! I don't want to go. I don't want to go back to the world of 2023. I want to stay. She said I could stay. That's my dream, to stay forever in the 1950s. And this could be real. I felt a chill at his words, but continued following the captain. Remember, Will was like, I love the 1950s. The car, blah, blah, blah. We'd reached the bottom of the stairs when a huge vibration surged up through the floor into our feet. It was so strong that I nearly fell down. What was that? Vinny spoke the same words out loud. What the heck was that? A new sound began filtering up from beneath our feet, a deep, low-pitch hum. That sound began to intensify. I suddenly saw the captain's face pale even farther than it already had. No, he breathed, then tearing up the sides of the stairs, dragging Will behind him. As we followed, I suddenly realized why he'd reacted that way. When I was a little child in the 90s, I traveled abroad a cruise ship with my aunt and uncle. and I clearly remembered that noise the giant engines made as they powered up before we left the port. The engines are starting. Everyone raced to the nearest door to outside the deck. I prayed that I was wrong, that the ship would still be dead in the water when we emerged outside. I wasn't. When we emerged on the deck into the fading light, it was to see that the ship had begun moving, accelerating far quicker than I thought such a huge ship could ever. The water at the stern stretched out behind us in a foam, churning up by the ship's huge propellers. As we stood on the deck, I felt a sinking, hopeless feeling falling over me. We can't escape in a lifeboat now. Oh, we'll be stuck under and torn apart. Because imagine you put the lifeboat down and, the huge waves of the boat. It'll just drag you down, I guess. Slowly, silently, everyone turned away from the sight, unsure looks on their face, except for Will, who wore a grinning, ecstatic look. We're back in our cabins now. We've partnered up, each of us having 3 or 4 people per room. Nobody wants to be alone now. The captain took Will into his room. He refuses to let him out of sight. The doors are firmly locked, though I doubt after what I'd seen if they truly want in, they'll find a way. And the fire axes we've brought into the rooms with us won't do any good. Somehow the others have fallen asleep. Spencer and Andrew on the giant bed, Wyatt on the floor with the blanket and pillow. I think I'm the only one still awake. This ship doesn't want us to leave. Enough to fire up its own engines and take off? For where? I don't know. I'm terrified. I don't know what's going to happen to us. I want to ask you what we should do now, but I don't know if any of you have any idea of what to do in a situation like this. And yet, I have to. It's the only shred of hope I have left. So, please, what should we do? How can we even attempt to stop the ship? How can we even defend ourselves against these things? Are they ghosts? And what is happening to Will? What did that woman he spoke of? Diana? What did she do to him? I was about to finish, but I have to tell you of 2 final things. The 2 things that scare me more than anything that happened today. The first is that I hear music. Not music over the intercom, but actual live music filtering in through the doors and walls. It's an old song, and one I recognize, a song my grandmother used to listen to constantly. A big band song called In Mood by Glenn Miller. Worse is that I hear voices, I hear laughter, and occasionally I hear screaming. But that's not the part that scares me the most, that fills me with existential dread. As I was sitting here typing, something was forced under the door. When I flicked on my flashlight with my shaking fingers and aimed it, I saw one of those programs like the ones I found yesterday. When I went over to it, though, I saw it was different. A smiling cartoon octopus stared up at me from the cover, and one that was playing a trumpet and a violin, its tentacles holding the same object that had been on the other program. When I flipped it open with shaking hands, I saw 2 things that made me want to scream. The first was the date in the upper right-hand corner, Wednesday, December 6, 2023. The second was what was on the left-hand page under the notice bulletin. We would like to welcome aboard a new passenger. Gabriel Lerner, Wyatt Strowski, Vincent Gutan, William Jenkins, Andrew Weber, Spencer Michaels, and Nathan Rogers. We hope you enjoy your stay with us. Oh, God, help us. That's all his crewmates. That's all their names. Redditor left this comment. Okay, so first, Will could be a determinant to your escape that may need to be dealt with, as he seems to be marked by whatever spirit is on the ship, and likely will eventually be taken over completely. There's still hope, though. Did you come across any salt in the restaurant area? If you can find salt every doorway and window you can. This keeps negative spirits from crossing. Use it around your sleeping cabin and the general area, engine room and control room. If you can do that, you can potentially gain control of the ship and make use of the engines to steer it somewhere safe. Crosses of any kind, that means safety and protection based off of whatever you believe in. Draw them on the windows, walls, everywhere. You might be able to restrict the spirit's movement this way. Continue to stick together. Do not split up anymore. As you've been shown, you can't trust your radios. Under no circumstance, don't leave anyone alone. Last resort situation. Destroy the engine, and once safe to do so, take your chances with the lifeboat. Another person said, yeah, agreed. Will's potentially a risk, and don't eat anything from the ship. There's something obviously weird going on. And then another person said, this feels like a loop that'll have to play out. The ship has burned. The ship will burn. There's nothing you can do to prevent that. The only hope that you have is to escape before the loop completes itself. Your new passengers? You're like the fuel for the loop. It's already too late for Will. The rest of you, find a way off the ship before it's too late. There's gotta be a way for you to get the safety boat lowered into the water. Maybe there's some way to sacrifice Will. Just let him go to the party. So the rest of you can draw less attention for a while. Oh man, people are just like, ditch Will. Another person left a good point. Basically, I don't think this one is like part of the story, like maybe the narrator left. But they were just like, I think you guys like were done for when the wave flipped you over and now you're in your maritime afterlife. They're like, just make the most of it. It said, it's worth a group trip up to the deck at night to see if there's any stars you can navigate by. Now that the ship's moving, you might as well try to chart a course. The longer you wait, the less aware you'll be of where you started. Also, maybe check for Morse code transmitters in the radio room, though I doubt any communication would be allowed to leave the boat without being intercepted or altered. Alright, now we're going on to part 4, and this time, the title changed a bit. It says, of course, the crew and I are stuck aboard an abandoned ship. There's only 5 of us left now. So remember, they started with 8, we lost Kenny, so that gave us 7. And then, it starts off, the captain is unalive. When we first started today, the 7 of us were thoroughly creeped out, terrified of what might lie in wait for us as we awoke in our cabins. Me especially, after hearing the music, voices, and screaming filtered in from down the hall in the very lounge we'd slept in for the last 2 nights. But I'd never imagined that when the day would end, there would be 2 less of us, 3 technically, counting Kenny. As hard as it may be to concentrate on anything, but that horrifying fact, I'll try and get to what you guys have said and commented. It's just like, he started like that, but like, what happened? To say I appreciate everything you've suggested to all of us, we're thankful. I feel like you guys are what's helping me cling to the last bits of sanity remaining I have in my mind. To the people who commented about making it either to the engine room or the bridge to try and stop, sabotage, or even change the course of the ship, that was the very idea the captain came to us with. But as I'll explain in a minute, it seemed I don't know what to call them, ghost entities, evil spirits, demons for all I know, anticipated the move on our part. Salt was one of the few ingredients we didn't seem to find in the Vanderdog row. Though, from what the map of the ship shows, there are numerous more restaurants on board, so we're going to keep an eye out for it. I just hope you'll be right about these things, being unable to cross it. To the person who mentioned the Morse code transmitter, I'd forgotten to mention last night that it had been torn out along with the radio microphone. These things very much do not want us trying to call for help. We're most definitely not splitting up anymore. Knowing what we do now, it's just too dangerous, even if it means moving slower. But I should just get on and tell you what happened. The 4 of us were woken up by several rapid bangings on the cabin door. After seeing the program which had been shoved under the door last night, I was only able to catch a small spurt of sleep. Ones that were all interlaced with horrendous nightmares of dozens, hundreds, thousands of spectators outside pressing up against our cabin, asking us to open the door and invite us into the party down the hall, before bursting into laughter and screams. So when the knocking began, I shot up from where I'd been curled up on the room's love seat, my clouded, half-asleep mind filled with panic and terror. They're here for us. It's like there was banging on the cabin door. And I think it's like the ghost or something, and inviting them, like, come down to the party. However, the voices on the other side of the door filled us with a momentary sense of calm. It was the captain's voice, but remembering what had happened with the walkie-talkie yesterday, Wyatt shushed us and crept to the door, putting his eye against the peephole. He stood there for a moment, then pulled away, a look of relief in his eyes. It really is him, he breathed out before unlocking the door. Instantly, the captain strode in, followed close behind by Vinny. For a moment, the relief returned until I realized that they were alone. He answered my unasked question before I was able to open my mouth. Will's gone. He put a hand over his face, taking a deep breath before continuing. I don't know how he managed to slip out without me waking up, but when Vinny woke up a few minutes ago to use the restroom, he found our cabin door unlocked and standing wide open. There's no sign of him anywhere. The captain's words hung in the tension of the dread-filled air. Every single one of us knew exactly where he'd gone. He'd gone off to find that woman again. Diana. Finally, the silence was broken by Andrew. So, what do we do? A pained look crossed the captain's face. I'm honestly torn, boys. Part of me thinks we should immediately try finding him if it's not already too late. But the other part thinks we should just try and find a way to either stop the ship or sabotage the engines. He looked over at me. Nate, have you checked the computer to see what those people have said? I shook my head, began to turn to boot up the laptop. When I first caught sight of the program lying on the floor, I knew it showed it to them. The already palpable fear infecting our group would grow. But at this point, hiding anything might end up being a fatal mistake. They need to see it. I cleared my throat. Sir, before I do that, there's something you all need to see. I picked up the program and handed it to the captain. Everyone crowded around as he flipped it open. I saw the man's face turn pale as they read the notice inside. Saw their own names written there. Andrew let out a shaky breath. Okay, I think I'm starting to turn into a believer of the whole ghost ship idea, he said quietly. After that, we quickly broke out the laptop and checked your comments. After reading them for a few moments, Wyatt pointed, smiling slightly. Cap, look, they have the same idea as you do, about either taking control of the ship or straight up sabotaging the engines. The captain stared for another second at the screen before nodding. Then that settles it. We'll head first back to the bridge, and if that doesn't work, the engine room. He gazed seriously around all of us. From now on, we don't split up from each other at all. It'll mean things will be done slower, but in my personal opinion, it's just safer. He shot a glance back at the door to our cabin, especially with Will being who knows where on board. Putting away the laptop, I quickly took a moment to set a solar charger on the lid of the porthole to gather a charge. The laptop's battery had gotten precariously low, and the 6 of us moved out the hallway. Closing the door behind us, we now carried 3 fire axes we'd taken from the red emergency boxes scattered around the ship. My head swung on a swivel as we passed each T-junction, half expecting something or someone now to lunge at us from around the corner. The silence only broke by the low, throbbing sound of the ship's engine rising from far below us. It didn't help the tense atmosphere that had fallen over us. I didn't know if I was more afraid of running into the ship's inhabitants again or my own colleague. When we reached, because Will's real, so Will could actually hurt them. When we reached the door to the lounge, however, all thoughts evaporated in my head as we froze. Staring into the room, it looked like the same it had yesterday, with 2 large exceptions. The first is that the raised section of the floor near the back of the room, where a band would play, one that was desolated and empty when we had arrived, no longer was. Even from across the room, I saw instruments set up, violins, trumpets, bass, a drum set, and more, as though they'd just been put there by a band. Realization flashed through my mind. The music I heard last night, it wasn't a hallucination, it was real? The second noticeable change in the room was the clear after remnants of a party. Confetti and balloons, which had lost the helium needed to keep them afloat, littered the dance floor, and on a few tables we could see half-empty wine glasses and cocktail glasses. They had themselves one heck of a shindig last night, Vinny said softly. I shot a glance at him. The look on his face mirrored the emotions I felt. In any situation, the scene would have been one to feel happy about. People celebrating something. Here and now, though, it would evoke some dread of fear and that one would get stepping into a haunted house. The captain shook his head slowly, then gestured to us. Come on, let's keep moving. And moving quickly, we crossed the lounge, kicking balloons out of the way before heading to the bridge. What the heck? Spencer exclaimed as we stood in front of the hatch which led to the bridge area of the ship, which yesterday we had stood wide open, held in place by the metal hook which had been set into an eye swivel on the wall. But now, as we stared in disbelief, it had been tightly shut. Not just shut, but locked. Trying as hard as we might, to the point our hands turned red and strung from exertion, the handle refused to spin. You've got to be kidding me, Andrew muttered as the captain began patting his pockets. His head snapped up. His eyes widened as he realized something. The keys, they're gone, he said before shaking his head. Will must have lifted them from me before he stuck out. The realization that we'd been effectively blocked from reaching the helm caused the hopeless fear we had yesterday. Seeing the ship move to return, I let out a sigh and put my back to the hatch, resting my head on the cool metal. After a minute, we slowly made our way down to the bowels of the ship. I already knew full and well what we'd find, but we still followed the increasingly hunched shoulders of the captain down the narrow graded steps, flickering on our flashlights as the incandescent bulbs over our heads became fewer and farther between. When we reached the hole and rounded the final corner, I saw what I expected, the metal hatch, above which the engines and boiler rooms were stamped. They were closed. Wyatt suddenly burst into a sprint, pushing past the captain to the door, where he frantically, almost hysterically, began yanking on the handles. It was as if he hoped he'd be able to wrench it open by sheer will, but it remained steadfast. Finally, he stopped and began kicking the door. "F you, you stupid piece of trash ship," he screamed, his voice bouncing off the grated floors and pipes, echoing away into the gloom. "And all of you long-dead, ancient, last-century ghosts." He collapsed to the floor, beginning to cry softly. I'm sorry if it kind of sounds like broken up and stuff. It's because there's a lot of curse words, and it's like, I gotta be like, fill them in or skip over them, and it's just kind of... I couldn't do anything but watch. Stunned by the man's apparent mental breakdown, Andrew, the captain, and Spencer moved to comfort him, leaving me and Vinny standing in the hallway. I shot a look to my left, seeing another closed and likely locked hatch. The sign above the door declared it as an auxiliary machine room. Sighing, I placed my head in my hands. They knew we would try this. They knew, and they just got ahead to cut us off. Likely with Will's help. Dang, probably. I was just trying to calm myself when the sound, one that was almost too quiet, I missed it, reached my ears. "Nathan." I froze in place, a massive shiver racing up my spine at the call. It was replaced by a steady stream of chills as my eyes widened behind my fingers. For a moment, I waited barely, breathing as I strained my ears to hear. My heart was doing the Macarena inside my chest. All I could hear was the soft hissing of the pipes that ran along us and over our heads in the ceiling, along with the soft voices of men ahead of me. I forced myself to let out a deep breath. "Try to relax. You're hearing things, buddy. It's just the pipes, nothing more. They're not down here with you. It's just beginning to believe it." When it came again, and this time it was unmistakable. "Oh, Nathan." It was the man's voice I heard on the radio on the second day abroad. The one I heard through the radio. It called out to me in a mocking sing-song manner, and without seeing anything, I knew the owner of the voice was smiling, and not a pleasant smile either. I slowly stood up, pulling my hands away from my eyes as my breath became ragged and shallow. And then, just as I thought it was impossible to feel any more frightened, the feeling of being watched came again, now from directly off to my right. Another chill shot through me as I realized where I was standing. I was standing almost directly in the middle of a T-junction. Oh no. Swallowing hard, I slowly turned, aiming my flashlight with a shaking hand down the hallway. I almost screamed. The shadowy figures were back. They stood at the end of the hall underneath a sign labeled Water Softener, an air conditioning plant. I couldn't tell how many there were, but they packed the halls from one side to the other, just standing out of reach of my flashlight's beam. Horror and dread filled every crevice of my body, and I felt myself beginning to shake. I attempted to speak, but my voice seemed to catch my throat, and then they took a step forward. The horror I felt increased as I saw the overhead lamp wink out, plunging the next section into darkness. I found my voice, struggling to pass a single word over my lips. Frick! Out of the corners of my eyes, I saw Vinny turn and look at me. The slight curiosity on his face immediately melted as he caught sight of the expression I wore. "Nate, what's wrong?" he asked. Faintly, I heard the others stop talking as well as they slowly began to make their way back. I kept trying to force more words out. I have to warn them, my mind screamed at me, but it was as though I lost grasp of English. I felt Vinny step next to me and saw his flashlight aimed down the corridor. Then I felt him go stiff as he caught sight of what I'd seen. "Oh," he breathed, then a little louder. Guys?" By now, the rest of our group had reached us, and everyone collectively aimed their lights down the hall. I heard Wyatt suddenly began to hyperventilate as the figures took another step. Another overhead light went out. "Uh-oh," the captain whispered. Spencer said nothing. I knew he had to be scared. finally face to face with what he denied about until now. As the third light went out, I finally found my voice again. Gabe, I felt the captain put a hand on my shoulder. What is it, Nate? I swallowed hard, then spoke the words I knew in the marrow of my bones to be true. I think it's time to start running now. The next moment, all of us were turning and sprinting back the way we came. Behind us, I felt more than heard of our pursuers give chase, and I heard a noise that chilled me to the bone. The sound of the overhead lights just behind us, not just clicking off, but shattering in their housing. The metal bulbs rang out with our screams and shouts as we urged each other to move faster, reaching the stairs and begin to climb. Move your butts, everyone! The captain shouted as he dragged Wyatt off the top of the stairs. As we climbed, my eyes flashed to the metal sign indicating the deck we were on. We passed G deck, then F deck, making our way up. As we reached the bottom of the landing, I spared a look down. This time, I did scream. The figures were swirling up after us. Swirling up?
Is it a spiral staircase?
Some didn't even touch the floor, flying through the air in pursuit. I heard the whispers, laughters, and screams. I'm not gonna scream. I heard when I'd become cornered by the gym. This time, however, the voices somehow held even more malevolence than they had originally. They're angry. They're downright mad that we just tried to sabotage the ship. I raced to keep up with the group. We just reached E deck when a loud clink came from above us. I reached the bottom of the next set of stairs where the others had gathered and looked up. And I almost screamed again. More shadowy figures were swirling down from above towards us. We were trapped in a pincer movement, with no way to escape. For a moment, the existential dread I'd felt facing the rogue wave that night came again, and I felt sure this was the end of us, until Spencer let out a cry. Look here! Spinning around, I saw a closed hatch standing a few feet away from us. The sign above, it read cargo/motor car hold. I was the closest to it and leaped for it, my hands locking around the handle and praying that it wouldn't be locked. To my relief, though, the handle spun and the hatch swung open. Come on! I yelled, moving out the way and let the others in. As soon as the captain dragged Wyatt through, I slammed the hatch closed and I heard the man's voice ring out again. You're only delaying the inevitable, gentlemen. I felt someone slam into the hatch next to me, turning to see Vinny begin locking the hatch. Reaching up, I did the same on my side. Not a moment too soon either. As soon as the last lock had flipped into place, something slammed into the hatch with the force of speed-light freight train. The two of us leaped back as the banging continued for a few seconds. Then abruptly it stopped. An eerie, unsettling silence fell over the hold, and after fighting to get my breath back, I turned to look into the room. Crates and other large boxes rose high above us, seeming to go on forever. Directly ahead, my light glinted off something powdered blue. Focusing my light, I saw it had found what it looked like an old mid-50s Cadillac convertible. The top was down, and I saw a matching blue leather interior, accented with white stitching. For a moment, everyone fought to find their breath. Then the captain spoke. Okay, boys, we need to find a way out of this hold and back up to the upper decks. Try and find another exit. There has to be one. Trying to stay as close to each other as we could, we began to move across the huge hold to find it. I stopped as I reached the Cadillac, reaching out and putting my hand on the quarter panel. The cool metal felt nice against my sweaty hand, and I was suddenly overcome with the feeling that I was just about to collapse. My legs felt jelly under me. I need to sit for a minute. Sliding down, I put my back against the car and slid to the floor, putting my head in my hands. I felt myself beginning to shake as the image of the figures chasing us replayed in my mind. Get a hold of yourself, Nathan. You're okay. You're okay. Just keep it together, I whispered. Suddenly, a voice came from me nearby. Dude, you okay? It was Vinny. Not wanting to see him from my frail mental state, I chose to keep my head in my hand. I just need a moment to collect myself after that, I mumbled through my fingers. Vinny replied after a moment, I get that, but you shouldn't split up from us. It's not safe. You know that by now. I sighed. He was right. I know, man. I began before letting out a shaky breath. I honestly don't know if we're going to get off this ship alive, and that scares me. Speaking the truth felt like a massive weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I felt the car rock slightly, indicating he leaned against it. He let out a deep breath. Yeah, honestly, Nate, I had the same thought. For a moment, the man's voice comforted me, knowing someone else felt the same. Then he continued. But I mean, maybe it won't be so bad. Confusion washed over me. What? Vinny's voice came again. I mean, come on. Eternity aboard a classy ocean liner surrounded by people who just want others to join them? It can't be all bad, right? You get to party forever after all. He let out a snort of laughter, but it hadn't sounded like the way I knew Vinny laughed. His laugh was deep, a booming laugh. This one had been short and nasally. Another chuckle came. The realization suddenly flashed through me as I remembered the radio yesterday. They can imitate our voices. A fresh dose of fear coursed through my veins as I slowly put my hands away from my head, suddenly feeling extremely vulnerable and realizing just how stupid I'd been. But there was nobody there. I mean, after all, it is the inevitable. So he was talking to the ghost or something. The voice came from directly over my head. I began to violently shake, beginning to hyperventilate as I heard all pretext of my crewmates' voices melt away. I was terrified to look up, but I couldn't help myself. Slowly and feeling as though I were about to die of a heart attack at any moment, I craned my neck to look above me, a pair of eyes staring down at me, peeking over the side of the Cadillac's hood. Ones that held both amusement and malevolence to them. The next few moments are nothing but a blur to me. The only thing I can remember is hearing my own shrill scream. That and blindly running away as I heard the confused, terrified shouts of the others as they attempted to chase me. I didn't even become cognizant of everything until I found myself in an unfamiliar foyer. Snapping back to reality, I looked around. I could hear the others' voices filtering up from above, calling out my name. What just happened? Swallowing, I turned and looked over the railing. I could see the flashlights widely aiming around. I swallowed, then yelled, "Here, I'm here!" A light flashed up, hitting me in the face and momentarily blinding me. "I found him!" I heard the captain's voice call up. "Nathan, stay right where you are. We're coming up." "All right," I called back down, then took a step back, aiming my light to see where I was. My light flashed up the sign which declared I somehow dashed all the way up to C deck. 3 decks. Then the image of the eyes began staring down at me, swarmed forward in my mind. I began to shake again, hearing the thing's voice imitating Vinny's echoed inside my head. Trying to calm myself, I took a few steps into the middle of the foyer, aiming my light around. It reflected off another sign, one that stuck out from the wall. Oh no, yeah, first class swimming pool. Beneath it were a set of double doors which stood open, the light inside spilling out into the landing. I couldn't see much inside, so I took a few more steps until I could clearly see. I blinked a few times. Am I seeing things? I wasn't. The swimming pool was packed. I saw people in old-style bathing suits swimming in the pool. A woman wearing a bathing cap swam by heading left, doing the butterfly stroke. The happy cry of children laughing could be heard, and 2 suddenly flashed by the doorway as they chased one another. I realized music filtered out from the room as well, old swing music which was playing from an intercom inside. None of that was what caused me to gasp. It was who I saw standing across the other side of the pool. I struggled to find my voice before calling out. "Will?" At my call, he turned to look at me. A huge grin spread across his face, and he raised an arm to wave at me. He looked nothing less than like the happiest man on the planet, and he wasn't alone. A pair of eyes had turned to regard me at my call. A pair of blue, almost sapphire eyes, one at that. For a moment it made me feel as though I was falling under some kind of spell. Platinum blonde hair bobbing around the shoulders, and voluptuous lips pulled back into a smile. One that held equal amounts of warmth and eeriness to them. She wore a white turtleneck and slacks that accentuated her figure, and a bracelet dangled from one wrist. Man, you got all that detail from across the pool? The lips contorted into a smirk as she snaked an arm around Will's shoulder, and one eye closed in a wink. I'd never seen this woman before, but I instantly knew who she was.
Okay guys, so we're done putting on the polygel. Now we gotta shape these, and we're just gonna skip past the shaping and then we'll be back afterwards. So we shaped all the nails and we're gonna end this part of the nail set here, leaving you guys on a bit of a cliffhanger for the story, but we are gonna be back very soon with the second part. And we're also going to continue these nails and finish off the nail design so Sister Spice can finally have both hands done. But yeah, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye!
Bye.